when she used to she made challah at a very different time, before a lot of modern conveniences. And she used compressed yeast, which of course I don't use. She also did everything by hand, which I don't do anymore. And wait, I'm gonna go get something. I'm just gonna show you, don't move it, honey. I'll bring it over. Years ago, we used to make challah by hand for Rosh Hashanah. And the kids would help with the kneading, as did Mike and me. It was about 10 pounds that we would do at a time, and this was the bowl we used. Well, I'd like to be able to throw the bowl over my shoulder to say, no more of that. Then I started using a food processor with the dough blade, and that was pretty good. But when I got the KitchenAid, life got much easier, and it made it so much simpler to make challah on a somewhat regular basis. So we are going to start. Cameraman, follow me. I'm lazy. I don't like to do more dishes than I need to. As my grandchildren know, I like to keep the flour contained so I don't have a big mess to clean up. So one of the things that I have gotten is a scale, because the recipe calls for 6 cups of flour, but I'm just weighing it and it's 32 ounces. So the scale can do the tare weight. I use King Arthur's flour. It's an ad for King Arthur. I use the bread flour, although I have done regular flour and it still works. But this is so much easier than even doing 6 cups. I'm at 30, there, 32 ounces done. Now, I do not bother weighing the yeast because I'm not sure this scale is as accurate as it needs to be. But into the bowl, I put 4 1/4 cups of instant dry yeast. I buy this in bulk, but the little envelopes contain 2 1/4 teaspoons. My guess is you could probably use just 2 envelopes, so you're 1/4 over. Some recipes call for much less yeast than this, but I'm putting that in. I've been known to make what Richard Fishbane once called Tuscan challah because I left out the salt. And I've done that on more than one occasion. I like a slightly rounded tablespoon of salt. I switched from Morton's to Diamond, and I don't know if it makes a difference. And something that not all challah has, but my grandmother did it, so I did it, is a few grates of nutmeg. So I do this, and that's it. And then I put it into this fabulous mixer, which takes a little time to get the bowl in sometimes. There. This is the dough hook. I attach the dough hook. And I just mix it around a very little bit. Okay. I have 1/4 cup of oil, 2 ounces. I have always said anything but olive oil, although people are now making challah with olive oil and maybe I should try it sometime. Also 1/4 cup of honey or sugar. I usually use honey. And one of the things that I do is I put the oil in first so that when you pour it out, the honey doesn't stick quite as much, which is why I didn't pre-measure it. And then the eggs are 2 whole eggs and 1 egg white because the egg yolk is saved for the top.
What size eggs do you use?
Large.
Okay.
But if I had something else, I'd use something else. Okay, Mike, we've got to walk to the sink. This is the most, I'm just going to put this in, the most specific part, because, I mean, a lot of times people will proof the yeast, which means you mix the yeast, sort of a low temperature water, maybe a little sugar, and you make sure that it bubbles because yeast is alive and you want to make sure it's good. This is fresh yeast, I know it. So I choose the method where I use hot water, which is between 120 and 130 degrees, because you don't want to kill, you want it hot enough to make the yeast work, but you don't want it so hot that you kill the yeast. Everything else I take liberties with if I need to. And let's see. Nope, it's too hot. But by doing it this way, I just don't have to fuss with the proofing. It's going down, but not enough. So, okay, we're good now. So now I want to make sure it's 12 ounces. And I assure you my grandmother didn't measure carefully, but this seems to be working. Ready? Now it's going to get noisy. And I'm going to pour in most of the water. Can you back up a little? I'm going to let that go for a bit.
Judy, what kind of thermometer are you using?
I don't know. It's just, I don't know whether it's an oven thermometer. I have no idea. Okay, and now I'm going to pour in all of this. There's still some honey that got stuck to the beaker. But that's why what I often do is I save a little bit of water so I can put it in, mix it around, and try to get everything out.
I just want to clarify, Marty Balin had asked you how many packets of dry yeast. You did use 2, right?
Well, what I use is slightly less than 2. But I don't think it would be a problem if you use 2. So this is, do you have it in here, Mike? This is doing its thing. And it's going to take a little time, but it's mixing it in. I'm going to make it a little faster. I mix it on either number 1 or 2, because I find you don't want to go too fast. The dough doesn't like it.
Heidi is asking, if you don't have the mixer, do you just stir it by hand until you get to this point?
Sure. Or put your flour in and dump everything, stir it, and then eventually you hand knead it. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm setting a timer.
Judy, speak up. You're in back of the
1 minute, Arlene. I'm going to move it here. Okay. We're going to move over here. I've got to wash my hands because they're sticky from the honey. Okay. So we're going to let that go. And in the meantime, whoops, excuse me.
Okay, Judy, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. The Boustons have asked, could you explain again why you don't need to do the step about adding water and sugar to the yeast?
Okay, wait, Arlene, you've got to say it again because I couldn't hear you.
Okay, could you explain again why you don't need to do the step about adding water and sugar to the yeast?
Okay, the proofing. You don't need to proof with instant dry yeast, which is what I think most of the envelopes are now. It says if the temperature of the water is between 120 and 130, that will just take care of it. It'll activate the yeast without having to go through the proofing step. I mean, I read it somewhere, I tried it, it works, and it's a whole lot easier. And normally, when I'm doing this, while the mixer is doing its thing, I put everything away, unless often I make a double batch, because I figure I've got everything out. And so I put one batch into a bowl, and then I do the other batch. But in any case, it's just a good time to get everything put away. So when the mixing stops, I don't have any cleanup to do.
Okay, next question.
What speed? To make sure it's working as well as I think so.
Judy, what speed do you have the mixer at?
Aha, okay. Come on back because.
Judy?
Yes.
At what speed do you have the mixer?
Right now, number 1.
Okay, and for how long do you run the mixer?
5 minutes. I don't know that I need to do it 5 minutes, but that's what I've been doing. It's sticking a little bit, so I'm going to add some flour. When I made the first batch today, it was absolutely perfect. Let me add a little more, because I don't want it sticking to the bowl. And this is noisy, but it's going to stop. I'll stop it in 2 minutes. But can you see how it's pretty much cleaning the bowl? Except there's a little bit there. Now, if you're doing it by hand, you just have to wait till it feels right. And I'll show you that as best I can. Okay, I think we're going to stop it. It's too noisy. And I think whether I really need to do the 5 minutes, rest for 5 minutes, and another 5 minutes, I can't tell you for sure. But that's how I've done it. This is how I've done it, so that's how I'm doing it tonight. Now, this was the batch I made earlier. I let it rise, and then I punched it down, and I'll show you how I punch it down. But I will tell you it had risen more before, because I think it could probably use a bit more time. I read someplace that if you stick your finger in and it leaves an indentation, it's ready. It doesn't need to be doubled. I read someplace 70%. I don't pay attention to that. When I'm ready to do, I generally say for the first rise, like once the dough is ready, I'll show you that step. It's generally 1.5 to 2 hours, depending upon the temperature. If the kitchen is hot, it goes faster. If it's cold, it takes longer. I punch it down by going like this. That's all it takes to punch it down. I let it rise a second time, which is what I just did. So now.
Judy, it just does that on its own. It turns into this puppy thing.
It what?
Punching it down and letting it come back up again.
Yes, it rises on its own because the yeast is alive. Okay,
so what do you recommend to use to grease the bowl for the dough to rise in?
Whatever oil I've used. It could be canola oil, I use sunflower oil, whatever I have that's not, I'll show you that part at some point. But what I'm going to do, and this is really, it's really nice and smooth. Sometimes it's a little bit tacky, but that's okay. And this is the part where the kids love to play with the dough. It's so nice and squishable. And the one thing that when you're ready to form the challah into a loaf or rolls or whatever you're doing, the dough should not be overly worked. It's all about the gluten wants to collapse like a rubber band. It wants to go back. And so if the kids have been playing with the dough, you really need to let it rest or you'll never be able to make the strands. Okay, I think I'll do this one. I'm going to do this one, I think. No, I'll do it this way. I didn't cut it quite in half. We'll start out easy. And what I find is if I can stretch it a little bit and then I cut it so that because what I'm trying to do is not work this more than I have to, so that when I start rolling it, let me see if it's going to, do you see how it's, here, watch this. You see how it's sort of shrinking back? So that what I might want to do is I might want to let it sit for a little bit. And ideally, I want the ends more tapered than the middle. I'm going to let this sit and we'll. Now, when the kids work with this, sometimes they make letters, sometimes they make designs. It's whatever they feel like doing. And what I think I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to show you how to make rolls. And that's the part I remember about my grandmother more than anything else, making the rolls because they were easy. I don't remember her actually do the braiding. She was 13 when, no, I was 13 when she died. And I wish I had had more time for many reasons. So Judy, I'm just going to let these sit.
Judy, a question just came through. Do the pieces, when you're going to braid it, do the pieces need to be the same length?
They should be, but they're not always. Okay, I'm going to start the mixer again. You can stay right here, Mike, because I'm just going to start it up. Okay, let's see if this is ready. Oh, I didn't turn the timer off. Let me do that. In fact, I think we're not going to do the whole time. I'll just tell you about it. The mixer is just too loud. And sometimes I really get lazy and I do this on a pastry cloth so that I don't even have to clean the counter. But it really does work better when you've got some resistance behind it that doesn't move. Okay, that'll pretty much do it. So to do a regular 3-strand braid, you've got that. So you just cross them. Any woman knows how to braid hair, and maybe men do too. And then I pinch it at the end, and then I turn it, and I braid it. And I pinch it at the end, and we'll push it in a little bit, and we have a simple 3-braid challah. Now, sometimes what people do is they do a smaller braid and put it on top, and I've even seen one with 3, and it makes it nice and high.
Okay, so do you know that they're ready when they stop shrinking back on you?
When they start shrinking back, it means you've got to let it rest.
So when they stop shrinking, it's ready?
Correct. Because otherwise, it would just keep shrinking, and you want it not to. It gets more relaxed, and then you can work with it more easily. It has to do with the gluten that gets developed, and the gluten is what makes it airy and stretchy and all of that. Okay. So here's
a question from the Bustans again. Why do you start the braids in the middle?
You don't have to, but I read that as I was preparing for this. I read that and I thought, gee, that's easier because it's more likely that it will be even if you start in the middle. I never did it that way before, and sometimes it would be a little more lopsided. Okay, what I think I'm going to do with this one, just so it has time to rest while I do the rolls, I'm going to, and It's nice when all the strands are the same length or the same size, but they're not always. Okay, let me just give them a start. I mean, this happens to be a pretty good way of doing it in that I can start it, I can switch to something else and then come back, which gives it the rest that it needs. Because you can, well,
Judy, how do you know when to stop rolling the strand so it doesn't become too thin? Is there a gauge that you use?
No. You do whatever you feel like doing. Let's see here. But if you can do it so that it's a little bit thicker in the middle, it makes for a better presentation. And as some of my friends know, I don't measure them. I don't cut them with a ruler. Okay, that'll get me started. I'm doing the same thing with these, but I'll show you how my grandmother made the rolls. And I don't know whether it needs to be thicker in the middle or not. You just want to make a snake. And then you loop it over, put it through, pinch it, and you've got a little roll. This one's going to be bigger because there's more dough. I can feel it. So I want a bigger loop so you can see it. I make a loop. It's just like tying a knot, putting it through, attach it. And when I do the rolls, I can do them so that they're in a pan. I could use a square, I could use a round. Got to turn the timer off, sorry.
Judy, when you do the braiding, when you do the braiding on the larger second loaf, can you go really slowly?
What was that?
You go really slowly when you do
the other loaf? Yeah. Absolutely. Because the 6 strand is hard. It took me a long time to learn it. I'm sorry, I thought I turned off.
Well, you may have to do house calls.
Here, no, it's not. Okay. So,
shut them.
What?
Okay.
Now, what I started to say is when I do the rolls, I find I don't really like doing them in glass, but often I put parchment in a metal pan because I don't like to have to clean the pans. I told you I'm very lazy. Okay, last one, like this, overhand, pinch, and I can put them together, and then when they bake, they rise up and they become like breakaway rolls. And often, let's see, I may need another cookie sheet, we'll see. Often, when it's just the two of us, rather than having a challah on Friday night, we'll just take out 2 rolls. And so we can say motzi. Okay, when I do this will go much slower because I need to think about it. There was a bakery in the Princeton Shopping Center a long time ago, and I used to buy challah there. And because I didn't make it every week for sure. And one time I said, I don't know how you do this, all of your braiding, because it was a 6 braider and I didn't have a clue how to do it. This was before the internet, where if you want to, there are different ways to do a 6 braid challah, and there are all kinds of ways. There's a 4 braid, there's a 3 braid. We can talk about a round one. And they were very kind, and they made a copy from their baker's book with the diagram. And I'm telling you, I would stand there with the diagram trying to figure it out. and it really took a while. But with YouTube, it's a little bit easier. Okay, these are not all the same, but I'm not going to worry about it.
But just for the information, this was a Russian bakery, and I think they closed around the late 80s. And they were phenomenal, I will grant.
Except, okay, here's a story. I took my kids in and they got cookies one time, and I personally thought they were really dry cookies. They made some very good things, but those cookies were bad. And we went in once, and because I kept saying, no, we're not getting any of those dry cookies. And David said, please, I want some of those dry cookies. And they heard it, but okay. This is not going to be perfect because the strands aren't perfect, but I don't think it matters. I've got to do it facing me, so you'll just have to see it that way. I connect them at the top. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of flour down, because sometimes the bumps in the challah kind of melt and you can't see them as carefully, as distinctly, that's a better word. So by adding a little bit of flour, they won't dissolve into each other. Okay.
Just so you know, David made a comment that the cookies were dry, but they were very good.
I didn't know he was on. Sorry, David, had I known you were on, I might not have said that. Okay, so I'm going to take the diagram was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you take 1 over to the side and you take 6 over to this side. And then your first one, which I guess is 1, comes down between these 2. I'm going to suggest it's going to be very difficult for somebody to remember exactly how to do it from my demo, but you can look it up online and you'll see how it gets done. So then I take this one and make it sort of horizontal and bring this one down between the 4 this way. This one comes over and this one comes in the middle of the 4. This comes over, this comes down. Am I going too fast? This comes over, this comes down. This comes over, this comes down. So here again, this one is the horizontal going across. This one comes between what's left, if you can see it. And then I just keep doing that. And then at the end, I pinch it and you can turn it under a little bit. It's heavier this side than that side, but so what? Usually I do the rolls at the end, so whatever I have left, I just turn into a roll, but this one's really little. So I'm gonna put this here, and then what I do is, I used to use saran wrap or plastic wrap. Now I use a damp towel because it is, it's more environmentally correct. And that's pretty much it for this. This rises for about a half an hour, and then I brush it with egg yolk. Now, some people use a whole egg. That works too. Some people like sesame seeds or poppy seeds. We happen to do plain ones because we don't like the poppy seeds in our teeth. And typically what I'll do is I'll preheat the oven to 375, and 15 minutes later, no, I wait 15 minutes and then preheat the oven. So it's preheated by the time it's risen. And if it's not exactly a half an hour, it just doesn't matter. Even with the Raisins, if I don't have time to let it go, or I'm out and I haven't gotten back and it's really grown a lot, so that's what happens.
Okay, Judy, I'm also going to add that Janet is, I think, echoing the way I feel. I have watched this many, many, many times, but can still only do a 3 braid and tastes wonderful anyway.
But she does a very good 3 braid. Okay, Mike, come here. This is not it's not fully mixed yet, but let's see. But it's just too noisy. So I got one of these recently, and it's a wonderful little tool. It's a bowl scraper, and it really gets in. This is not too bad, but I just think it needs a little bit more. But you can, okay, it's sticking to me a little bit, not too much. And if I felt it were needed enough, what I would do is I would take a little bit of oil, I'd put it into my bowl. I would put this back in and sort of flip it around a little bit, and then put a damp towel over it and let it start the risings.
Judy, what's the name of the tool you use to cut the dough?
I think it's a bench scraper. You could use a knife, but it happens to be good when you're ready to clean up, because you can go like this. And you can use the bowl scraper exactly the same way, but
yeah, I've seen them in Bed Bath.
I think better cut.
I've seen them in Bed Bath and Beyond. I think they're like less than $10.
Oh, they should be cheap. So anyhow, and then miracle of miracles, when it's done, come with me, Mike.
This is the Julia Child moment, everybody.
That's right. And I can touch it because it's not hot. And here's the finished product. So, and I often freeze them. They freeze perfectly well. And then when we're ready to have it, I'll put it in a warm oven. If I'm preheating something else, I'll stick it in the oven just to freshen it up a little bit. And nobody's ever told me it tastes like the freezer. So I'm going to rinse.
Judy, question from Marty Balin again. The 6 cups is for how many loaves?
2. 2 loaves like this one. Do you want me to weigh it and see what it weighs?
You could.
I can do that. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you, a round one. Let's put it here. .8 ounces.
Okay, a question from Karen McEnroe. You don't bake on the parchment paper and the pan, just
no,
on the oven rack?
I do bake on the parchment paper.
Yeah, okay.
I do. Now, when I'm doing the free-form ones, it's on parchment. It doesn't have to be. It could be on a silpat. It could be on a corn-milled baking thing. But I've discovered the joys of parchment because I don't have as much cleanup to do. So it works really well. Do you want me to explain how some round ones can be done?
If you would, that would be great.
Okay, you'll have to visualize. There are many ways to do it. One of the easiest ways is to make 2 really long snakes. And once you have the 2 strands, you twist them around each other. And then you start with one end and you just coil it around like a turban. And then when you get to the end, you stick it under in the middle so the middle pops up more. There are many more complicated ways where you make it like a tic-tac-toe board. You've got 4 strands and then you sort of weave them in and out. But I recently tried the kind with 2 really long strands. I just twisted them around, made a turban, and it looked nice and it tasted okay. I'll entertain any questions you've got.
Should we have people unmute themselves so they can just ask you without going through the waiting room or the chat room? Anybody?
Judy, that's a beautiful loaf. I love the way you did that.
Thank you.
Beverly, Beverly Beer.
The punching again. I had to run out for a second.
Karen McEnroe.
You punch the dough or something? What was that? You had to punch the dough. When
Right.
you take it out of the mixer, after the dough rises, do you punch it a couple times?
Okay, after the dough rises, after the first rising, yes, I punch it down. I don't knead it, I just punch it.
Just once?
And then I let it rise again. And here's where many recipes, ultimately I'm doing 3 risings because the first one I punch down, the second one I punch down and then form it into the shape, and then I let it rise again. I have no idea whether I need to do all those risings, but I've done that. The other thing that I have tried recently, and I may very well do with this, is make it at night, put it into the refrigerator, and then in the next day, you need to take it out with enough time so it returns to room temperature, and I'm never quite sure how much that is, but it seems to work.
Okay, question from D. Silver. When do you put in the raisins if you're going to be using them?
I have never put a raisin in a challah.
Where's that?
I imagine that you would do it, I would think either you could just start putting the raisins in with the first rise or wait until, I really don't know.
We do have a question and an answer here.
I was going to, Arlene, I was going to say our family was anti-raisin in challahs, so I don't know.
I'm anti-raisin in bagels. I totally understand. Okay, but somebody had asked, now I'm missing who it was, if your grandchildren know how to make them, and I think we got an answer from a couple of grandchildren that yes, they do.
Yeah, I'm not sure they can do the 6 braid one, but they have.
You're getting a no here.
What?
They're all shaking their head now.
Oh, okay. The other thing, all right, I will try to show if anybody wants to knead by hand, and it's very satisfying. And there's something that says if you're going to eat the bread, you may as well work for it. But you have this dough, and the method of kneading, I don't know if you've ever kneaded clay, but you kind of push your palms into it and move the back to the front, and you twist it a little, and you push again, pull it back, twist it again. But it's real work, but it's good because the dough feels so wonderful. That part is satisfying. Just this is easier.
We have a couple of questions. Roberta Stern. Roberta, hi, how are you? She has soaked the raisins and added them to the dough when it's almost completely done kneading.
Okay.
And Ellen Pristek would like to know, at what temperature are you doing this?
375. Oh, and the way to know, now I happen to have a convection bake setting, and I've been using that because I think it makes it a little bit browner. And I even read, I think if you have a thermometer, it should be at 190. I've never checked the temperature, but there should be a thud when it's done. And sometimes it doesn't look as brown as I'd like it, so I leave it in longer. Or I might even take it off the parchment and put it right on the rack.
Okay, Judy, so Barbara Reef has added in that if you want to put in raisins, you should do it at the very beginning with the water and the yeast. But another question that we have is, what are the mistakes that people make when they're inexperienced, when they're first starting out?
The only thing I can think of is being afraid of it. It just, somebody's got.
Yeah, somebody's got something going on there.
Yeah.
Maybe
all right.
Put themselves on it again.
I would say it's better to knead, N-E-E-D, to add flour rather than adding water. Because it's easier to do, if the dough is too dry and you have to add water, it's just harder to get it in. Then when I did it tonight, it was sticking to the bowl a little bit, so I added some more flour. Other than that, I really don't know. Just don't be afraid of it. Some people are afraid of yeast. It works. It knows what to do.
How long do you bake the challah for in a convection oven and then in a regular oven? How long?
I mean, here's where I don't know the difference. Supposedly a convection oven says that you should reduce the temperature by 25 degrees. By that, a 375 degree regular oven would be 350. But I find it works just fine at 375, whether that should be 400 in a regular oven. Every oven is different. And if it's not getting done, you just leave it in a little longer.
How long about do you bake it? Like that one, how long?
I would say 30, 35 minutes.
Okay.
I've never done it less than 30, and sometimes it goes a little bit more. The rolls could be done sooner. I mean, it depends on the size too. For holidays, sometimes I've done one huge round challah for Rosh Hashanah for a lot of people, and that probably takes longer. It's called trial and error.
You know, Judy, I use the King Arthur's all-purpose flour. And what's the difference between choosing bread flour?
Okay, good question. The bread flour, I have learned, has more protein in it, which means there's more gluten in it. Because you know how when you pull a challah, sometimes you get those strands? Mm-hmm. And I think bread flour helps develop that more. I used to do it with all-purpose flour before I knew bread flour even existed, and it worked. Mm-hmm. But since I've discovered the bread flour, that's the only thing I use for it.
Thank you.
But if I need to add a little flour because it's a little sticky or down here, I use all-purpose because that's what's in my little cup here, and it makes it easier.
Well, thanks. This is terrific. I appreciate it.
Our next Food Network star. Thank you, Judy.
This was okay. We're going to have a lot of challah around here.
Either that or I'll just go house hopping and see who wants to make challah with me or for me.
Well, if it were normal times, we could all have a challah party, but not to be right now.
Another time soon, we hope.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay, if you've got questions, let me know.
Also, if you've got applause, please unmute yourselves.
Oh,
Judy.
One more thing, forgot.
One other thing, thanks to Mike for the great job he did videoing this.
Okay. So when I brush it, I go like this. And as I say, I use the egg yolk. You could put a little water into the egg yolk. I know people who use a whole egg and it gets not, I think it just doesn't matter all that much. When we hear from Jay, I'm looking forward to the black and whites because when we would go to New York, my grandmother always had black and whites from Cake Masters for us. But he might know whether the difference. I'm just a home cook and baker. I don't know the details.
Put that on right before you put it in the oven. You put it right on the dough, right? The yolk?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. What I would do is I just would go like this. I don't want to touch it till it's risen a little more because I'm afraid I'll puncture it.
You use the yolk. You don't mix it with water, right? Like
I usually just use the yolk if it seems, if I haven't covered it tightly and it gets a little bit firmer, I'll add a few drops of water, but
Jay Schnitzer said you were wonderful.
thank you, Jay.
Judy, I just want to say that when I bake my challah, I do use olive oil. I didn't always, but I had come across a recipe that called for the olive oil. It is delicious. It makes a very rich tasting challah. You should try it.
I will. There was somebody who was doing, I forget, it was through some Jewish temple, and she did a tahini challah.
Oh.
And Martha Friedman made the tahini challah and gave me a piece of it. And we both decided we didn't like it.
I made one also. I didn't like it.
Okay, but I may try it with olive oil sometime. Part of it is, I've thought about it a number of times, but then I thought, you know, it's Grandma Evelyn's recipe. Let's not change it too much. So, but thank you. I will try it sometime.
My father used to put a little saffron in to make it very gold. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, but I don't have any saffron.
And the nutmeg, can we use dry nutmeg instead of buying whatever you have?
I would assume so, but I use so little of it.
Okay.
I can, knowing it's in there, I can taste it in the challah. If I didn't know it was in there, I don't think I would know.
Okay.
And I've never used ground nutmeg.
Judy?
So really don't know. Yes.
It's Cynthia Neufeld. This was really very enjoyable. I enjoyed it very much, but I wanted to mention to you, several years ago, they published on the packet or one of the newspapers, one of your grandmother's recipe for kugel, potato kugel, or potato latkes and kugel.
Potato kugel.
Grandma Bertha, we're waiting for that presentation.
Oh, and I have used that recipe all these years. I don't know how many years ago it was, but that's the recipe that I use for my potato kugel.
Wonderful.
So I don't know which grandmother it was, but
it's the other grandmother.
Yeah.
So my kids this Passover asked me if I would make Grandma Bertha's potato kugelettes. And that's not the name of their grandmother. It's the name of Judy's grandmother. But they remembered it. And I had a consult with Judy and they were spectacular.
Well,
It's the spring program.
Another word about them.
I wanted to ask the nice woman who liked the olive oil, challah. What olive oil did she use?
Beverly Levy Bear.
I use Trader Joe or Berio, I think it is.
Berio extra virgin.
Extra virgin olive oil,
but not light.
Say that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Regular extra virgin, not light extra virgin.
No, regular olive oil. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, but extra virgin, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's also let it be noted that Judy once won the Sisterhood Kugel contest at the Jewish Center.
It was, okay, so I'll tell you now, and if we do this again, you'll hear it again. It was a year of the Olympics, I don't remember which year, and Jewish Center women had something called a Kugel Olympics. And everybody brought in their kugels, and there were judges, and we left them there, and it turned out I was the gold medal winner. I say not humbly, but it was my grandmother's kugel recipe, potato kugel, that instead of doing it in a pan, it was a friend of my mother's who said she did them in muffin tins. And so that's how I did it. Mm-hmm. And if that was my Hungarian grandmother, and if she only knew
everyone got a corner,
how far and wide that recipe has traveled, she would be totally amazed.
Judy visited us in California soon after she won the Kugel Olympics medal. And we met her at the airport with a sign that said, "Welcome Olympic champion." Is one of the Olympians coming? I said, well.
I just want you all to know that I was a judge. Judy, the fix was in no matter what. So guys, this is a cookbook that the Jewish Center put out. And the very first kugel is Grandma Bertha's potato kugel.
Oh, nice.
Ellen, what year is that from?
I'm looking. It was compiled by Ricky Schechtel and Denise Shipper. And I don't see a date on it, but I know it's a long time ago.
I think it's probably like around 1990 or 94 or something.
You know, there's no date. I don't see a publisher's date. Copyright.
Is still
I
available.
can find out.
It's before my time, so that's before 92.
But it's called The Joy of Kugel.
That's cute.
That's a messier operation, though.
Well, sign me up for that potato kugel.
Judy, did you say how we know when the challah is finished cooking? Just the color of it?
Yeah, by the color, and then if you turn it over with a mitt on your hand, so you don't burn yourself, you thump it, and it should sound kind of hollow.
Okay,
And I'd go by color.
Interrupt for a political announcement here. I'd like to remind everyone to join JCW on Thursday at the PT.
Okay.
You can still RSVP for it. So if you would, please, that would be great.
What is
1995.
Oh, that's
oh my God.
Can everyone see? It's from the Princeton packet.
What a great picture of Judy.
That's the recipe. That's the recipe. That's the article that I got the recipe from.
Oh my goodness.
And I may have it called for a little bit of matzo meal, which I have since left out because I have some gluten-freers in the family, and it's still works.
Right, I leave it out also for that same reason, but I always make the kugelettes also. It's a great recipe because you heat the oil and then you pour in the potatoes and it makes it nice and fluffy. That's what the article told me to do.
I don't think I even do that anymore, but yeah, I should start.
So Judy and Mike, it sounds like you're going to have to be booked for another performance.
Yes, for sure.
I can do that one.
What's that JCW on Thursday? I missed that.
It's the kickoff
event. I'm coming to see.
What's happening on Thursday for the JCW?
Lauren, jump in on that, please.
It's the kickoff event for our mitzvah project this year. It's the Princeton Period Project, and Gil Gordon is going to be talking about it as he started that program in Princeton. And it's going to be, it's a very interesting story, and it's a very, very good cause. So it's on Zoom, and we'll send the link out on tomorrow.
Lauren, could you save it? Because I'm busy. Other people are probably busy too and would like to hear what Gil has to say. Can you just that
can be recorded.
I guess ahead of right before we start, we could ask if anyone objects to it being recorded, and if no one does, we could.
Okay.
I don't think it's a problem. This is being recorded right now.
And I didn't ask anybody if they objected, so I hope that they don't.
Okay.
Judy, thank you. It was great.
It really
was wonderful. First of all, one of the things I just want to comment is it's so wonderful to see how much history there is. Mm-hmm. You know, there's just a lot of shared experience, a lot of history, a lot of people who haven't seen each other in a long time. It's very, very sweet. The only thing that's missing is a taste of your challah, Judy.
Okay, but we do have a request. Elaine or Lynn, first of all, start with Judy. If you could email the recipe to one of them.
It was in the link that everybody got, Arlene. It was in the link that everybody got to come tonight.
Okay. Can we also get the kugel recipe as long as I have you on Recipe Watch?
No, well,
we might want to save it for the next program.
Yeah, let's save it for the
give away the store.
Right.
Judy, do you have any recommendation? What kind of a knife to use for the challah?
What kind of knife?
Yeah, I mean, there are serrated knives. There are knives with big serrated.
I have a variety of knives, including some that have Jewish stars on them. I like just a plain serrated knife, but definitely serrated. I'll show you my bread knife. Keep it there, honey.
Okay.
This is, let's see.
A weapon.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's kind of long, but the serrations are good. When they're really, this is wavier. There, you can see it there, yeah. Rather than just little lines. Yeah. This works really well.
So Judy, I have a question. What whatever instrument you used to cut the dough didn't look like it was serrated.
No, it wasn't. But okay. I thought Anita was asking once it's done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was asking to make it. Never mind.
Oh, and maybe I'm wrong. But any kind of knife to cut it, you don't need the bench scraper. And Andrea was the one who called it that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what to call it.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions, comments?
Great. Thank you, Judy.
Well done.
It turned out to be fun.
Judy, this was phenomenal.
And I can't wait for Jane to do black and whites.
I'm going to give this the coming attractions. Tomorrow night's photography workshop. Next Monday is gluten-free focaccia with Marilyn Besner. And then the following week on Monday again is Jay Schnitzer with the black and white cookies. So other things coming up, but in terms of baking from Arts and Culture, that's what's coming up.
What about Daniel Mack next Sunday?
Correct. There's more than I could even mention going on at the Jewish Center. So check your emails, but I was just focusing on Arts and Culture.
And sign up early.
Please.
Okay.
All right, this was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
It was wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Elaine, you're the host. You have to shut us off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to stop recording.
Good to see you.